You're tuned into the Wade Borth Podcast, the place where clarity replaces confusion and real conversations open new doors for your financial life. Let's dive in and rethink what's possible. Hello, welcome back to the Wade Borth Podcast. Today we're going to talk about something, maybe because it's the time of the year, and when I'm recording this, it's the end of the year. Start looking forward to what we're going to do next year, kind of what our plans are. Start rethinking, and again, this is something we should be doing all year long, but sometimes it's very easy to push it off and do it at the end of the year. But the idea of what got you here, it won't necessarily get you to where you want to go. And this thought is, this is bannered around all the time in the industry, and really with clients, really in everything else. But it's our ability to start rethinking what we think, right? Hey, what do I need to change? And so I love this idea of what got you here will not get you to where you want to go, or will not get you there. And I just want to touch on this a little bit because I've coached a ton of agents, a ton of clients. In my role with Fact, I'm doing direct coaching with agents, and it's like when you have some success, you think, oh, I'm going to fall back on that success. And we're going to talk about that and why that can sometimes hold you back. Or if you're a client, it's like, I've got these policies, I've done well, I've saved, but am I moving forward? Am I having progression? If you're not having progression, then we might have to consider, like, what do we need to do differently? So let's talk about that today. I'm excited to have this conversation. Hopefully you stick with me. It's like we have to have some introspection about what we're doing and how we're thinking. And just to let you know that there are people in your world that are there to help you and to bring you some certainty, some clarity to what you're looking for. So sit back, relax, kind of take this in. Again, it really is spun off the idea of, like, as an individual, we should always rethink our thinking. I think that's one of the things we talked about at the Nelson Nash Institute a couple of years ago. That was kind of the theme. It's like, rethink your thinking. And it's very helpful. And we're going to go through some of that today and why it matters and what are some ideas that we can do to help make that happen. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see there's a screen where we're talking about, what we call the 5 areas of life. And we love this conversation around the 5 areas of life. And what do we want in these 5 areas of life? We have the spiritual, we have the personal, we have the family, the financial, and the occupation. And what does that mean? And really what we talk about when we start all our conversations and all our presentations off with this idea of we want abundance in all 5 areas of life. And it's that striving for that abundance that is the reason why we do what we do. Are you being a good leader in all those areas? Are you leading yourself the way you want your spiritual life to develop and evolve? Are you leading yourself from a personal standpoint? Are you becoming that person that you want to become? Are you leading your family? That's another strong question we have, a conversation we have with a lot of clients. What are you doing to lead your family? And we have a lot of conversations around family banking. And so it's not always about that, but it's just about, are you being a good steward of that? Are you leading in your occupation? What are you doing to lead yourself versus have something happen to you in your occupation? That's always the case. A good leader is thinking, a number of steps ahead. And are you doing a good job being a leader and finding abundance in your occupational circle or occupational area of life? And then the other side of the equation is financially. Are you being a good leader, a good steward in the financial aspect of your life? And are you finding abundance there? And so, and again, I don't know that, some of the worst things I think Nelson wrote in his book is the arrival syndrome is what can stifle all creativity and all success. Because once you think you've arrived, then you have nothing else to learn. And so I always, in my mind, look at this, when I look at this circle with all these different little pie pieces in there, thinking, how do I move towards the 10 that I'm searching for? And I don't know that I ever reach that, because once you reach a certain level, we should come back and rethink our thinking and say, okay, now how do I grow even more? And until you can get to a certain plateau, and if you can just imagine climbing this mountain, until you get to a certain plateau, you're not worried about getting to the peak. It's like climbing Mount Everest. You have to get to, to certain levels before you worry about getting to the next level. And so, again, I don't know that you ever arrive, and hopefully you never arrive. Hopefully it's a constant progression of growth within your life, and growth within your leadership, growth within your abundance, what abundance looks like. What I thought about at 19 or 20 or 30 or 40, even at 50, isn't always what I think about today. It changes. Our life changes as we accumulate understanding and accumulate experiences. How we see things will change. And so we should constantly be going back and saying, how do I find abundance in all these areas? How do I find that leader that I need to be in all these different areas so I can have that abundance? So, there's a quote by a Buddha, it's a Buddhist scripture. And again, it's attributed to a lot of different people, but it's very simple. It says, if you don't change direction, you may end up where you're heading. If you don't change directions, you may end up where you're heading. And think about that for just a second. If you don't change directions, you may end up where you're heading. Is that where you want to be? Or do we need to make some course corrections along the way? And I really believe, getting started sometimes is the hardest. And once we start, it's just this idea of flying a plane from LA to New York. We're going to get on this plane and the winds might push us one way or the other. We might get some headwind, the rotation of the earth as you're flying. All those things have to be taken into account. And we make these slight adjustments along the way so we end up in New York on that flight. But if we start out and we never make a course correction, and we never evaluate where we're at and where we're wanting to go, we're going to end up in Nova Scotia or someplace that we don't necessarily want to be. So the idea is, yes, get on board, get your motor in the water, start heading out, and make your course corrections along the way. And that's really what we're going to talk about. How do we make this course corrections? How do we even realize that we need to make course corrections? So, and the idea is, probably part of this is I was thinking about this just for myself. Is like, who do I want to become, right? What does my journey need to look like? And I was thinking about this idea of I have this identity, and I'm thinking about climbing up this mountain. I'm climbing up this mountain, and I have my identity. I have my identity. It's like I have my all the work and all the effort and who I was from the last 35 years in this industry. And I don't necessarily want that to define where I'm going to go. But it is easy to fall back on that. So you end up dragging this identity, this rock of who you were, up this hill. It holds you back because you're not letting go of that, but you're not evolving to say, who do I need to become in order to, take me up that hill? So it's important that we understand that our identity and who we see ourselves being and who we see ourselves becoming. One of the most interesting books I've ever read was Becoming Your Own Banker. And we've said this many times, the most important word there isn't banker, it's becoming. Who do you need to become? And I think about this from my own personal development and where I've had to go and who have I had to become in order to be the leader that I want in all these 5 areas so I can find abundance. So it comes back to, and I'm probably the reason I'm doing this podcast is just because it's so important to me and I wanted to share kind of the journey that I was headed down. So, but it's very subtle, right? You become great at yesterday's version of yourself. When you think about that, you become great at yesterday's version of yourself, or your job or whatever it is. But that won't get you to where you want to go from this point forward. Again, it's if you're climbing that mountain, is that yesterday's version of yourself holding you back? Or what can I do to increase where I want to go and who I want to be? Because I want to get higher up the mountain. So, it's the why, right? It goes into, I was having a conversation with a client this morning before the podcast. We were talking about this idea that growth requires subtraction as much as addition. Sometimes we have to let go of certain things before we can grow into the potential that we want to grow into or grow into the leader that we want to grow into. I've always been a big fan of addition and not such a big fan of subtraction. It's got 5 to 7 rooms and it can really handle at an effective level 5 to 7 items, 5 to 7 rooms of things you deal with, like what you want to grow and things you can actually do. You get beyond that, it becomes very difficult to manage those things. So our brain kind of naturally protects itself. And so we have room for 5 to 7 things in our brain. So what is those things that we have to take out, set aside, so we can create more room for the things that we want to become? Some of that's our identity. Some of that might be, hey, I have to give up one job in order to be able to focus and go all in on this particular job I'm doing. We have a saying, that my friend Kyle Fuller at Factum, we use this all the time. It's like, you never achieve your full-time potential on a part-time job. And so sometimes we have to let go of everything else to go all in to focus on that one thing that will, again, the one thing is another great book, that one thing that will get you to where you want to go, right? Well, how do you find abundance? By holding on to things that are holding you back. Although you might think it's good because you think, hey, that's who I am. but it doesn't allow you to grow to the person you need to be. And so these are just some things that I constantly evaluate and go through as we start thinking about how do I become that leader that I need to become. If I'm coaching an agent, it's kind of the same question. If I'm talking to a client, it's kind of the same thing as like, what do we need to let go of in order to focus and become an expert, to become a great leader in a different area? So again, sometimes growth requires subtraction, although it's never been, I've always been a guy like I believe in addition, but I know that sometimes our room can get very full of stuff. And it's just like anything else. Sometimes you got to go clean out the house before you put anything new in. My wife uses the example all the time. She says, I need to clean when I'm going to put up my Christmas decorations. It's the end of the year, right? We're in Christmas decoration time. We have to have that subtraction. We have to take things away. Otherwise, you're just layering, things on top of things on top of things to the point where then nothing becomes important. And so I think there's just a really good lesson there. It's like subtraction sometimes in our lives. Maybe we were, if I'm an agent of the business and I was good at a certain aspect of the business, or I had a certain marketplace that was decent and I found some success there. Possibility is we might have to let that go and say, thank you very much for what you did for me in that part of the business. But in order to get to the higher level of what I want to do and the impact I want to have, I have to let go of some things in order to move forward. I know I've had to do this in my own life. And sometimes it's hard. It's very hard. And again, I don't leave it behind with animosity. I just say, thank you. You're still part of my life. You're still part of the building blocks that made me who I am. But now going forward, I need to move into a different phase and a different era. So start looking at those things that got you to where you're at today, financially, in your business, in your practice, just in your mindset, that was successful, that maybe is just holding you back today. Just because you go, oh, well, I was successful there, so I'm going to continue to hold the reins to that horse, even though that horse isn't running as fast as you're running. So give that some thought. Start thinking about how your skills, like what got you to where you're at, isn't necessarily going to get you to where you want to go. So this idea keeps coming back in the sense that, what do I need to do? So here's just a really good example. I heard this, I think it was John Maxwell Leadership talks about it, or it doesn't matter where I listened to or where I got it, but they were talking about the reason why a lot of people don't, succeed, have a tough time growing, is because they're looking at this thing as like, man, I don't want to 10x my business. I don't want to grow 5 times as big as I am today, or I don't want to have 5 times the success I have today, because what is that? I can't work 5 times harder. And the answer is absolutely right. You cannot work 5 times harder. That's why sometimes we have to let go of some things that we've done in the past. Stop working 5 times harder, and let's just imagine if we can get 5 times the results and even work less than what we're working today. That would be the ultimate success, right? That would be ultimate abundance. You get more free time, but you're getting more out of your business. That's why I love and I embrace the infinite banking concept. We're getting more out of our money, more out of our finances by doing the same amount of work, maybe even less work, but we're finding a multiplier effect to it. So what are some of those things in your career, in your job, in your business, your practice, in your life, finances, all those 5 areas that we're looking at on the screen? What are some of those things that we can do where we can find tremendous abundance, maybe by doing something different instead of we're just working harder? Because quite frankly, I don't want to work 10 times harder to grow my business, my practice 10 times as much, but there's got to be a way. And once we understand that, once we start imagining what that looks like, it's going to happen, but it's going to happen differently than what you were doing today. So let's find some different strategies for what you're doing. Is there a system? Is there a process? Can we delegate? And more clarity we have to where we want to go will help us see what it's going to take to make that happen. I think there's a real strong story there as well, right? Do you have clarity to where you're going? And once you have clarity where you're going, and sometimes that doesn't always show up right away, but the more clarity your coach, your mentor, your partner, whoever you're working with, you can get more clarity from them, the more obvious those things are that, well, I was doing this and it got me there and I was working hard, my head was down, but now I'm going to take a step back, find clarity to where I want to go. How do I grow 3 to 5 times my business without working, 5 times harder? That answer is there. We just have to have clarity where you want to go. Allow that message to come to us, and it will. So working harder is not I mean, I love working hard, but working harder doesn't always make it happen. Sometimes it can have the opposite effect. That's going to be burnout because I'm going to work harder, getting the same results. And so, anyhow, part of mastering a craft is starting to understand, like, how do I find leverage? How do I find, like my partners, my key collaborators that I can grow, that have a system or process or that I can delegate to grow my business. And so if you got questions around that, I love this part of the conversation. If I coach agents on this conversation all the time. People think that I can do everything, and the answer is exactly right. You can do everything, but the question is, should you? Should you be doing everything? Because it's holding you back. So cut the line of the rock that's holding you from climbing up that mountain. Cut that rope, tie your rope to a rock that's up above you that you can pull on and get you up that hill even faster. And you can do that by creating stewardship of your business, stewardship of yourself, and creating that leader that you want to become. So anyhow, but part of that really comes back down, you give up some control and you have to start trusting other people, right? Think about anybody that's ever worked with a mentor or coach, clients that work with their agent, people that I work with. It's like, hey, I got to trust you, right? I want control, but I also have to trust you. So the more control you give up, quite frankly, a lot of times the further you can go, because you can find trusted individuals around you to help elevate who you are. So you don't always have to be on. You don't always have to be working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because again, that's not a sustainable pace. And quite frankly, that's not a good leader. Because then, are you finding abundance in all these other areas, right? You might say, my occupation, I'm going to work 24/7, or my finance, I'm going to spend all my time kind of focusing on that. But are you being a good leader? Are you finding abundance in all those other areas? And more than likely not. So it's about finding that balance and that abundance in all those areas, not just one. Because if it's just one, if all you do is concentrate on just one thing and everything else wanes away, it becomes this wheel that has got a very big flat spot. It becomes very bumpy. So anyhow, that's why the intensity of how you work and the focus of how you work maybe should be a trade-off with consistency. Let's find more consistency in your life. Let's find more consistency using in the banking concept that we teach all the time. It's like it's the consistency of having a process, a thought process, a system that works really well. So therefore, you're not constantly have to be intense and constantly recreating the wheel. So there's that old idea of, like, I was talking with Emma, who helps run our operations, and she said, sometimes it feels like in order to put a new step on the ladder as we're climbing this, put a new rung on the ladder, we have to climb all the way back down the ladder, grab a new step, grab a hammer, and go all the way to the top, nail it on. And then we want to go to the next level. We have to go all the way back down, grab a new step, grab different nails, climb back up that ladder and nail it on. It becomes very exhausting. And the higher you climb, the more difficult that becomes. Versus saying, what if we had a system and what if we were consistent with the sense that these steps are going to come up just when we need them, and then with the nails and the hammer, so then we can just put them on when we need to. We don't have to keep climbing back down the ladder. So that's one thing I want you to think about as you're looking forward, like, how do I grow? How do I become a better leader in my life, and how do I find abundance? Is by that idea of, like, can I find some consistency in my life and my business, so I'm not always having to reinvent the wheel, not having to always climb down the ladder to get the piece that I need in order to grow with the next step. So then it becomes, you don't have to become the expert. Quite frankly, that's great leaders rarely are great managers, and great leaders aren't necessarily the experts. How many people do you know, like, how can he lead the company? He doesn't know enough about this. Well, he knows enough about who the right people are that can be in that place. So think about your team that you have around you. We have a conversation with our clients about it, this idea of wealth scorecard. If you haven't received that, if you want to reach out to me, I'd love to get this in your hands. Like, who is the team that you need to assemble around yourself to find that consistency in your life, to find that system in your life that gives you abundance, so you don't have to go become an expert in all areas. Let people who have a passion in whatever they do be part of your team. And that's where, maybe I come into play as a coach for an agent, or as an agent for a client. Is like, we have the ability to bring, everybody has the ability to bring in coaches and experts around them to help support them and grow where they want to grow. So think about who you surround yourself with, who's on your wealth team, who's on your coaching staff to help you grow, and who's your strength coach, right? I was actually, in my conversation with my client, we were talking about He's a coach. He's a basketball coach. He teaches. He's not necessarily a coach for a team, but he teaches. And we are just having that same discussion. It's like people are very focused on, kids are very focused on now, or parents are, about getting their kids the right coaching, the right strength coach, the right nutrition coach. They're already kind of doing this, and these kids are bigger, faster, stronger than I've ever seen them before. And it's just amazing the results you're having when you incorporate a team. So the question is, who do you have in your team? And we have a really neat framework. And again, that probably goes to the next piece, is like, stop working from tactic to tactic and go into frameworks. We have a really neat framework to say, who needs to be on your wealth team? You can put it up on the wall and say, of these 8 people I need on my wealth team, I have 5. Now on my next journey is like, who do I add to it next? And who do I add to it next? We have relationships with everybody that kind of fits into those wealth, that needs to be on your wealth team. So we have kind of a stable of very good horses that can help you wherever you're at. And so whatever position you're at in your life, just know that there are people that are willing and wanting to help you, because that's their passion, is to help you and to empower you to become, that 10 in these 5 areas of life. And each person has their passion to get you in certain areas. Are you working with a personal trainer? Are you working with a family coach? You're working with a wealth strategist like myself, or wealth coach like myself? Do you have a mentor or somebody you're working with in your occupation? Do you have, a trusted spiritual advisor? You need all these things in your life. You need an attorney. You need your P&C person. All the things we talk about from our wealth scorecard can help people at least put some frameworks around things. So most things in life, if you can start to develop frameworks, it's not like a hard and fast rule, but it's more of a framework. So think about how I can grow my business and grow myself if I have the proper frameworks. I've worked really hard with our team, like, let's build a bunch of frameworks for people to plug into versus trying to figure out specifically. I don't want to solve exactly what you need. That's where empowerment comes. You know better than anybody what you need in your business and yourself. So let us provide the framework so you can say, here's what I need, and let me go now tailor it for myself. So empowerment is much better than doing for you. We love empowerment. We love the idea of the Go-Giver. It's another book that we have up on our shelves that we read every year. It's this idea of like, what is it that allows you to become to achieve your goals, and who's empowering you to make that happen? So find the right framework. So hopefully that makes sense for people, is like the idea of framework. We have solid frameworks for our clients. We have solid frameworks for our agents that we coach. And it's helpful because we're not having to go back constantly and reinvent the wheel. So don't tie yourself to your identity. Your skills will grow faster than your identity. We get comfortable. We're comfortable. We know who we are. And then we have this identity of this persona, who we think we are. But our skill sets grow much faster than that. If you tie everything to your identity and your skill sets are growing faster, you might actually limit your ability to grow in your skill sets. Be careful about grabbing hold of an identity. This is the rock I was talking about that keeps you from climbing up the hill. We need to cut that rope of that identity, not so much that it's not important to us. Again, thank you for getting to me where I'm at, but in order to get where I want to go, I need to start thinking about who do I need to become. And that's just the idea of this identity lag, right? If we allow ourselves to be identified as X, whatever X might be, or you identify as, I'm only going to work and earn this much money. If you allow yourself to be pigeonholed into that, then it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Throw your lasso around the rock that's up above you so you can pull yourself up. Yes, I know we've gotten into a lot of philosophical conversations, but what I'd probably just ask you to do is start thinking about, what do you want in these 5 areas? What is it you're wanting to do, and how do you get there? Again, I'm going to kind of just reframe this as like, come back and say, let me have a little bit of reflection. And first starts with identifying where you're at. Do you know where you're at in these areas? And then the next question is, where do you want to go? And once you can answer those 2 questions, then it becomes very, I don't say easy, but it becomes a lot easier, a lot more clear how you're going to get there. It's like we have to start adding some people. We have to have a conversation with Wade. I heard you talking about, finding frameworks. I heard you talking about, who should be on my team. Do you have any suggestions? Or let's at least have a conversation around that. So I might not have the answer, but at least having the conversation is going to open up your mind to this idea of, I need a mentor in my life to help me grow in my business, or I need a financial coach like Wade to say, how do we start thinking about these things a little differently? And then the first question I'll ask you is like, well, where is it you want to go? And then once you can answer that, then we can start finding pathways to get there. And so it takes some reflection. We should be doing some weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual reflections. And that's kind of where this came from. This discussion came from. We've been doing some annual reflections. We've been doing some annual projections and planning for a year or 2 or 5 years from now. And it really starts making me think is like we need to start letting go of certain things that are holding us back. But then we also have to embrace certain things that we've never used before as well. And we do have the proper frameworks to make that happen. So I think that's probably the conclusion, is that where are we at in our process? Because leadership is about continuously becoming. So think about where you're at. Where do you want to go? And more importantly, who do you need to become? And what is your plan for a better future, right? So you start thinking about this, start planning this, start thinking mentally is like, who do I need to become and how do I need to grow in my own personal self in order to achieve what I want to achieve? These are exciting times. This is exciting for me. I love coaching clients and agents on this idea of who do I need to become? What do we have to do to become better leaders of ourselves and become great leaders in all 5 areas, right? Because if you're not leading in these 5 areas, how can you find abundance? It'll be somebody else leading you, and it's going to be their abundance. It won't be your abundance. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to be part of the conversation today, because this has been on my mind to want to have this discussion, because I love helping and empowering people to blossom and grow, right? I just imagine this field of people. Again, I'm a North Dakota farm boy, right? And I just imagine these sunflowers opening up, this whole field turning from brown to just bright, vibrant yellow when the sun comes up. And that's exciting to me. So seeing everybody grow and develop and expand at all levels is one of those things that's why I want to become. How do I become that person to empower you to become the person you want to be? So thank you so much. Again, it's the Christmas season, so Merry Christmas to everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. So thank you so much.
Grateful to have you tune in today. If you're ready to rethink your financial journey and take the next step, make sure to subscribe. Until next time, stay curious and stay in control.